wives and 2 concubines and 11 children, and then he decided to flee back to the land that God had promised him, and he fled secretly because he was afraid that his uncle Laban would claim his wives back, you understand? Or his daughters back, who were Jacob's wives. Well, Laban pursued after him and eventually caught up with him quite near the boundary of the land of Canaan. Now, when they fled, Rachel, who was the daughter of Laban and the second wife of Jacob, stole her father's household gods. Now, first of all, he shouldn't have had household gods. And secondly, she shouldn't have stolen them, but she did. And Laban was extremely angry because his household gods had been taken, his little images, you know, that protected him, etc., etc. You know, the kind of thing that people keep, which is totally against the will of God. So Laban catches up with Jacob and he says, "Why did you take my daughters without saying goodbye?" And he said, "Well, I was afraid you'd take them back." And Laban said, "Well, secondly, why did you steal my household gods?" Now, Jacob did not know that Rachel had taken them. And Rachel succeeded by a very typically feminine ruse from allowing Laban to discover where they were. So Jacob was very indignant because he'd been accused of stealing his father-in-law's gods and he hadn't done anything with them. And so he said just this one verse about the household gods in Genesis 31, verse 32, "With whomever you find your gods, do not let him live." But the Hebrew says, "let him not live." You understand? Now that's a curse, "let him not live." And it was pronounced by Jacob, the husband of Rachel. And he had authority over Rachel. It was not an empty word. Was a word that was charged with his authority. You know what happened? You know the story? The next time Rachel had a child, she died in childbirth. See? Jacob had pronounced the destiny of his wife. Now this comes very close home. Another person, as I've already mentioned, is a father. Second to the blessing of God, the most desirable thing in life is a father's blessing. And one of the things to be feared most is a father's curse. Now, many fathers have put a curse on their children without knowing it. And I know this because I've dealt with so many and helped them out of it. See, a father can have, say, 3 children. The first is clever. The third is clever, but the middle child is not really so bright. So the father doesn't like the middle child. You know what I've noticed about parents? If there's one child they don't like, it's usually the one that's most like themselves. I think they don't like what they see of themselves in that child. So the father says to this child, "You'll never make good, you'll never succeed, your brothers are clever, but you'll be a failure all your life." You know what that is? It's a curse. And you'd be amazed how many people struggle all their way through life because of a parental curse pronounced upon them. See? Another kind of person that can pronounce a curse is a teacher, because a teacher has authority over his or her pupils. And again, it may be that a teacher in the early years has one pupil whom she really just can't get on with, you know? There's some kind of personality clash. And she says things like that, "You'll never learn. You just will never learn to read. You just haven't got it. You'll never succeed." What's that? It's a curse. And again, I've dealt with people who've had to be delivered from a curse pronounced by a teacher. There's many different. Another person who can do it is a pastor, because a pastor has spiritual authority over his congregation. Suppose a pastor has a clash with a member of his congregation. That person leaves, maybe in a bad spirit. The pastor says, "Wherever you go, you'll never succeed." Till you put things right with this church, you'll never get on anywhere. Do you think pastors ever talk like that? Believe me, they do. You know what that is? It's a curse. Religious groups are terrible about that. If you break away from some groups, they will automatically put a curse upon you. And believe me, that's not something that is of no consequence. It's real. We've got to go on. The next category is a very common one, self-imposed curses. Curses that people pronounce on themselves. We'll go back to the story of Isaac and Rebekah. You remember that Rebekah had persuaded Jacob to steal the blessing, or to get the blessing. I wouldn't say exactly steal it, but cheat his way into the blessing. Now, Jacob was smart, and he said in Genesis 27:12, perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to him to be a deceiver, and I shall bring a curse on myself and not a blessing. And his mother said to him, on me be thy curse, my son. It'll come on me, not on you. She pronounced a curse on herself. Later on in the chapter, she said to her husband, Isaac, she complained about the wives that Esau had married, who were the daughters of Heth, and she didn't approve of them.